How he ended up in the emergency room after my pregnancy announcement. Right after we revealed my pregnancy, my sister-in-law Nela tried to publicly embarrass me at my husband's party, but her plan failed very famously. She is now going through a divorce and spending time in jail. Married to my partner William for the past 7 years, I am a 29-year-old woman. Apart from one thing, his sister Nela, I enjoy practically everything about our marriage. She infects our life with negativity. I honestly loved Nela when I first met her, but with time that changed. She proved to be absolutely poisonous, manipulative, and pessimistic. Knowing her nature, I have worked hard over years to keep on her good side. When my husband dated Nela's closest friend when he was 17 years ago, they split up since he felt under pressure into the relationship. When my husband reached 23 and started dating once more, his sister recommended he should see another one of her friends, but he objected. She went crying to their parents, saying she wanted him to wed someone she felt comfortable with, and this set off a major dispute. Still, his parents paid her requests very little thought. When my husband and I met and started dating, his parents were much in support of our relationship, but his sister handled me with a constantly cold attitude. She would tell William how well his exes were doing and advise him to get in touch with them, always bringing up his exes for no apparent reason. This continued for some time, and William and I thought it quite unusual. He would implore her constantly to stop bringing up his exes, but instead she would become enraged and begin to tease me. She would accuse me of being jealous and demand that William not be with someone as insecure as me. She would deliberately bring one of William's exes whenever his parents asked us over for dinner, saying she had happened to run across them that day and felt obliged to invite them politely. She checks my profile constantly, even if she does not follow me on Instagram. Since I have a public account, I have found she usually views my tales first. She runs to her brother right away to complain about indecent images if a man remarks on one of my pics. William and I would actually laugh off her ridiculous charges. She believed William could find someone much better for him and pressured him to break up with me when he and I chose to live together, pointing out my apparent flaws as a woman. Her remarks hurt, particularly given my normally polite treatment of her. She behaved worse, sadly, once William and I were engaged. Everyone praised us when we declared our involvement except from her. Nela stayed especially quiet following our announcement of our engagement. Then, shockingly to all, she stood up and left the party. She later called William, crying and screaming that she didn't value being informed the news at the same time as others. Being the closest to him, she felt she should be the first to find out about his engagement. Later on, she messaged me nearly borderline threatening, reminding me to be a good wife to her brother since she had always been the only woman in his life. I nearly shuddered over the strange message. I sure annoyed her even more as I didn't even bother responding and left her on read. Nela began to ignore me progressively every time she saw me. She stayed active in all the wedding preparations, including my bridal shower and dress shopping, always. She did, however, criticize the wedding to a whole other degree, openly voicing her displeasure with my decisions. This was even though my fiancé and future mother-in-law called her out several times. I unhappily let Nela attend our wedding since I wanted to avoid giving her any chance to knock down us going forward. Except Nela, everyone including the guests happily followed our wedding's precise pink colors and pastels motif. She arrived looking black, floor-length gown with a veil, as though she were going to a funeral. To put it mildly, we were all stunned. During the reception, my husband observed how uncomfortable her attire was making me and approached Nela about it. She said she was mourning the loss of her brother to another woman, insisting she had the right to wear whatever she pleased and accusing me of being too controlling. She tried to play the victim. When she wouldn't stop creating a commotion, my mother-in-law and father-in-law finally urged her to leave. It was embarrassing. I've avoided her ever since that day. I banned Nela from being anywhere near my baby Joey when I delivered him. She tried to resist it, but my husband and his parents totally backed me. They appreciated my choice and knew why I wanted her away from our child. Nela suffered greatly after a miscarriage with her then boyfriend, Ralph, 2 years ago. For everyone, this was a difficult period. William and I really felt sorry for her as we already had a child. We chose to be more forgiving following her miscarriage and began bringing her over to spend time with Joey. Though she treated me differently, She was incredibly lovely to our son. She looked to have changed at first, but with time she went back to her old ways, always blaming her ex-bosses or ex-friends for her difficulties. She continuously complains about how difficult her life is and how nothing seems to work out for her. I have found over time that she believes she is never at fault. She continually seeks sympathy by portraying the victim and rarely acknowledges any responsibility for problems. She chose to get married this year and invited everyone except of us. When William heard we weren't invited, he was surprised, particularly because our relationship looked to be growing. She said she couldn't let me go when we asked her about it, as she thought I may cause her wedding to be understage. Given I had never done to her, I phoned her to find out why she would assume such things. Nela then said she had deliberately worn black to our wedding and was now concerned I might do the same to hers. She was so manipulative, which infuriated me right away, and I told my husband. After William spoke with his parents, they agreed to let Nela know they would neither pay for her wedding or show up for it. Nela started blaming me for starting this mess and started crying. She had no right to blame me. My husband reminded her because she had freely recognized her error, saying our wedding was long ago and I should just get over it. Nela took to defend her behavior. She later contacted me to apologize and ask for pardon as her parents still refused to cover her wedding expenses. Though I hate to say it, when Nela wants something she can be rather lovely and convincing. Hoping to move on from the past, I forgave her. Her wedding to Ralph went perfectly, and we all showed up and had fun. Not even 6 months later, though, Nela arrived at our door complaining that her marriage was failing. For a few days, William and I let her stay with us. During this time she raved for hours over her husband. Nela was obviously blaming Ralph for everything as they were unable to conceive. When I tried to talk to Nela, she said that her husband was totally responsible. She would become hyper-focused on our life when she wasn't screaming about him, sometimes creating imaginary difficulties. For example, I normally visit the gym first thing every morning before work. If I'm running late, I pack my work clothes so I may complete my exercise, shower, and change into it at the gym. When Nela observed this trend, she began bombarding me with questions about why I carried my work clothes with me or why I was showering at the gym. Nela began to wonder why I even need to be at the gym. I would simply say that I loved keeping my weight and didn't want to go to the office all sweaty, not really thinking about it. She would only nod and lick her lips. Things improved between her and Ralph finally, and she returned to live with him. My husband and I visited with my in-laws for lunch one Saturday. Others invited were Nela and Ralph, usually bored when the grown-ups chatted for hours. Our kid Joey wanted to stay home and play, so we left him with a babysitter. My mother-in-law was sharing with us about one of her close friends who was divorcing her man since he had betrayed her. Lunch suddenly interrupting, Nela asked my husband whether we had signed a contract of marriage before we were married. We all stopped eating and fixed our attention on her as she gazed at my husband, totally neglecting me. Never sparing his words, my husband told her straightforwardly that we didn't feel the necessity for a prenup since we both earned well. Nela snorted and began to discuss how he might be blindsided at any moment and how many cheaters there are around today. Her reply offended me, therefore I asked her just what she meant. Then Nela said that since I always brought a change of clothes and William's sister had its responsibility to warn him, I must be meeting someone else. Her claim astounded me. Fortunately, my in-laws corrected her right away for making such unfounded and nasty assertions. Nela's in-laws asked her right away to give up interfering with other people's affairs. She claimed, though, that she was just keeping an eye out for her brother, without skipping a beat. She then crossed the line by teasing if our son, Joey, was truly William's since he didn't exactly look like him. I had never seen my hubby this angry before. I watched as his cheeks flushed, saying she didn't deserve to be a mother and that her child was better off in heaven than with someone like her. He stared Nela directly in the eye and advised her that this kind of behavior clearly explained why she wasn't a mother yet. Nela opened her mouth in disbelief. As my husband let the anger take off, my mother-in-law and father-in-law sat in shocked quiet, claiming Nela was a loser who did nothing all day while her husband worked hard. He termed her a shameless person who attempted to ruin everything because she had nothing good in her own life. He went on, stating she should concentrate on her own marriage since she was obviously projecting her own anxieties instead of challenging us about prenums and launching unfounded charges. Reduced to tears, Nela began to cry, looking at Ralph, who was seated just next to her. She hoped for support, but he said nothing. My partner had never lost his cool in such manner. Nela eventually stood up and sobbed as she sprinted into the bathroom. My mother-in-law came over to cool my husband's anger while I stroked his hand. He was still boiling. I agreed, knowing just how annoying his sister could be when he apologized to me for our son. Having gone through enough Fronla, I was secretly happy my husband had defended me so openly. I chose to stay courteous even though I disagreed with a word she said. I wanted not to be impolite. After years of dealing with Nela's antics, my husband at last cooled off and apologized to Ralph but totally ignored Nela. Lunch was over, and we returned without interacting with her. Her actions had not only damaged me but also started to wear down my husband. To stop any more interaction, we forbade her from all kinds of correspondence. Later on, my in-laws discussed what had happened at lunch and decided Nela had crossed a limit. They watched as their usually composed son lost his cool over Nela's persistent provocations. We last spoke to her a year ago, and everything has been going perfectly. We weren't even trying, so 2 months ago I was surprised to discover I was pregnant. Being here to greet another family member makes my husband and me blessed. We intended to tell the news on my husband's birthday and decided to wait for the right occasion. For William, my in-laws were throwing a large celebration in their garden, inviting close family and friends. Nela had to have heard about the party from others and choose to show there. Seeing her startled my husband and me. She came up to William, hugged him, and expressed her regret for their previous chat, as well as her great missedness of him. Holding my hand, my husband advised his sister that since she had insulted my character, her apologies should go to me. Nela nodded, turned to me, apologized, saying she had been attending therapy for a few months and had come to see how inappropriate it was to denigrate me. Not wanting to face Nela in front of everyone, I nodded in answer to her apologies. Privately checking in with us, my in-laws assured us they had no knowledge she would be visiting and would be willing to ask her to leave should we be uncomfortable. William agreed to let it go since this was a party for my husband and he didn't want to create a disturbance. Nela appeared odd for her, laughing and mixing with everyone I saw throughout the party. She was behaving somewhat optimistically, but since she started visiting a therapist, I decided to treat her with the benefit of the doubt. William made a touching speech when it came time to cut the cake, thanking another year with a woman like me and stating he felt he was the luckiest man on earth. His comments made me flush with delight and made me thankful that our love was still as strong as it had been when we first started dating all those years ago. Then William and I told everyone some great news. We were expecting a baby with smiles on our faces. Before everyone burst in delight, there was a moment of stunned quiet. As my father-in-law and mother began to congratulate us, my mother started to cry and hugged me. Everyone asked if we had considered any baby names, clearly delighted for us. Nela was the only one lacking in the delight. She first appeared shocked, and I thought she was simply digesting the information. Her attitude immediately changed, though, and she turned away from us, clearly angry. A little concerned, I wondered what she may do going forward. Though I was concerned Nela could try to spoil yet another party for us, I was sidetracked by other individuals approaching to chat. I stood up to assist my in-laws bring out lunch, but Rick and my dad demanded I stay seated, that I shouldn't touch anything during this time. I so patiently waited for my man to bring me a plate. To my amazement, Nela came up to me grinning broadly and carrying a dish of food. She presented it to me, and proudly declared that since she was so delighted about my pregnancy, she wanted to personally serve me. She even said as she handed me the plate about attempting to make up for all the time she had been nasty to me in the past. I nodded and politely took the dish. She left. I discovered the plate included prawns just as I was ready to start digging. My family is fully aware that I am rather allergic to prawns, thus I was surprised when Nela presented it to me. Disappointingly shaking my head, I got up to get my own lunch. Ralph came over at that to wish me well on the pregnancy. We spoke for a little and he observed I was not eating. I clarified that Nela had unintentionally handed me prawns, which I was allergic to and could not eat. Ralph comforted me by picking the dish from me and stating he would eat it since he loved prawns, so urging me to fetch a fresh plate. I nodded, grinned, then turned aside. Not even 5 minutes later, Ralph began to retch over the dish and puke. Concerned, everyone stopped eating and fixed their gaze on him as he tried to get out of his seat. Panic driving them, William and Nela hurried toward him. Ralph's face contorted in pain. He moved toward his plate, then toward his throat. Our eyes grew wide with amazement as we came to see that what he had eaten clearly was wrong. Ralph passed out shortly later, and everyone gasped in amazement and worrying. With widened horror, Nela hurried over to check his plate. Still processing what was happening, she turned to me and asked whether I had given her husband my plate. I nodded. Ralph was driven to the hospital when someone called for an ambulance during the chaos. Nela was crying nonstop and kept looking at me with a mixture of dread and rage. Ralph had been poisoned, and later on we were told. Hearing this almost made me pass out since I knew the plate, meant for me, might have poisoned my baby as well as me. William, my in-laws, and my parents still don't know about this horrific truth. Since nobody knows what caused Ralph to pass out so quickly, the police were asked to pick up the food as evidence. Ralph is still in the hospital resting as I am composing this. Nela stayed with him overnight. Concerned relatives have been calling my husband and me, all wanting to know what happened to Ralph and who might have possibly poisoned him. The happenings have really unsettled my in-laws, who are staying with us as they are too scared to go back to their own house. Given how everything looked to be going, nobody knows how things went so badly. Revealing that the plate was once mine and that Nela had especially brought it to me makes me nervous. Should this become an inquiry, I know I will have to be honest. Though more than that, I am now rather concerned about what Nela could do to me. I feel really ashamed about what happened. She obviously has no problems with wanting to hurt me, resulting in I cannot risk being around her or letting my kids anywhere close by. I'm wondering whether I should be responsible for passing Ralph the plate, as it might have caused poisoning of my brother-in-law. I hadn't been able to sleep, my hands were shaking when I first penned this. Though what everyone says, I do feel somewhat accountable for what happened to Ralph. I let him take it from me even though I keep thinking I should have just tossed the plate away. I'm still grieving and worried about his future. Sensing something is off. My husband has been hanging around me, assuming I am simply nervous. But he has no idea what I know about his sister. Although my in-laws have security cameras set up around their property and the birthday party occurred in their backyard, I'm not sure whether they would trust me because the tape will clearly show Nela handing me that plate. My mother-in-law and father-in-law are already lodging with us, so I sat down with William and them over supper to go over things. I started by inhaling deeply, the weight of the circumstances slumping on my shoulders. Gathered about, I said I had something crucial to talk about. I related the birthday party's events, including how Nela had handed me a platter of shrimp and how Ralph had unintentionally consumed it and become sick. Their shock and incredulity at my words matched my own. William's face transformed from perplexity to fury as my mother-in-law and father-in-law exchanged worried looks. I went on, sharing my concern about Nela's intentions and noting past efforts to hurt me. I said I had been afraid to tell this truth since I feared what it might mean for our unborn child and me. Ever pragmatic, my mother-in-law advised looking over the security camera right away, and my father-in-law nodded in accord, realizing the gravity of the matter. Though obviously offended, William stayed quiet to process the startling disclosure. The truth was clear when we looked over the security footage from their camera app. The video amply demonstrated Nela presenting me the plate and the events that followed causing Ralph's discomfort. Emotions ran strong as the truth of Nela's actions laid in front of us left no room for debate. William battled to control his anger since he knew his sister had bad intentions now. The way their daughter behaved horrified my in-laws, who were also astounded at the extent she had gone to cause anarchy. Trying to understand why she would do something so horrible, we sat in startled quiet. Following this disclosure, my in-laws have resolved to give this top priority and think about the required actions to shield our family from more damage. Given the gravity of this, my in-laws agreed to provide the police the proof. Once Ralph heals, Phil and my husband will then meet with him since he is the one who has to file charges against Nela. Every time I consider how I let Ralph consume that poisoned plate, I get sick with guilt. I have no idea how Ralph will react. I'm so anxious about him, so I can't eat or sleep right. I will let you know about major events. Nela was arrested upon evaluation of the evidence after my in-laws turned over the tape to the police. She accepted everything and started crying instead of even disputing the claims. Ralph was as stunned as the rest of us when my husband spoke with him about what happened. Explaining that what his sister had done was quite nasty, my husband persuaded him to file charges against her. Furthermore, comforting Ralph was his assurance that he would always be a member of our family, whatever of his choice. Ultimately, as Ralph recovered, he chose to file for divorce in addition to pressing charges. Calling my in-laws, Nela sobbed and begged for forgiveness. As it happens, Nela is pregnant herself. Trying to control them by telling them they should do it for their grandson, she begged them to help her out. Phil strongly advised her, nevertheless, that she should start owning her behavior as they were done coddling her. Though she is rather depressed about all that is happening, my mother-in-law knows that this is essential. Although what her daughter has done breaks her mother-in-law, she knows that Nela's behavior cannot be just pardoned. The authorities discovered proof she had tampered with the meal meant to injure me, but it backfired and resulted in injuries to her husband. She has been accused of several crimes, including endangering life, inflicting hurt, and tampering with food. Ralph is resolved to see her punished even if she begs Ralph not to file charges and tries to assign responsibility to me. Her court case is soon, and it's doubtful she can avoid the fallout this time. My son and I are doing fine. He is clueless about what his aunt accomplished. William and I have talked about it. We intend to sit down with him to go over everything. Even if it may be a challenging topic with a young child, we think he should be aware of these kinds of circumstances. As instructed by my doctor, I also schedule frequent 2-week ultrasonic scans. We want the kid to be a surprise, hence we do not intend to find her gender. Knowing what has happened to Nela, my parents have been somewhat protective of me. They are urging me to visit therapy since they are concerned about how this circumstances can compromise my mental health during the pregnancy. I agree with them since after what Nela did, although attempting to act normal, I felt a strong anxiety. I am now terrified of eating any food I have not cooked myself. Understanding my anxiety, my hubby is helping me at every turn. I hope I'll get over this illogical anxiety shortly. Update 4. My last update was 8 months ago, and Nela is in prison right now. She came clean on all counts. Though I never went to her court hearings, my in-laws did and told me what happens. Nela told court that she had been jealous of me for years as she never wanted an outsider to wed her brother. She tried to bully me since she had always dreamed one of her best friends would marry him. Nela became rather jealous when we told everyone we were pregnant during my husband's birthday celebration. She had intended to let everyone know she was pregnant at the same gathering. She wanted to share her good news after a miscarriage earlier, but she thought we had grabbed her opportunity. She claimed to be so unhappy, partially because of her pregnancy hormones, that she mixed a little rat poison into my meal. She said she never meant to hurt the baby or me, and simply wanted for me to wind up in the hospital. She said she deserved a shorter sentence as she never intended me to offer her husband my plate. The judge turned her down naturally, and she got sent to prison, where she would spend a protracted period of time away from us. Ralph is at last free since he has effectively divorced her. Over the past few months, we have seen him and been including him in our family events wherever we can. He told me that he does not hold it against me after we spoke, and I profusely apologized for handing him my plate. When Ralph told me it was never my fault, I started to cry. I had been repeatedly going over the events in my thoughts, wishing I could have done differently to prevent him from becoming poisoned. Ralph is doing fantastic now, which makes me very happy. Regarding William and myself, our family now boasts a baby daughter. Our daughter's presence has filled our life with warmth and light even if the past still casts shadows. Over the ecstatic about becoming a big brother, our son Joey has been showering his small sister with love and devotion. Seeing our kids grow makes us appreciate things. My parents and in-laws have been there for us through all of this, guiding us across this new chapter in our life.